The first thing we want to point out is this levy is not a new tax. It's a recurring levy that has been in place for years, that the community of Longview has supported very consistently. We're very grateful for that. It's just the renewal of that tax over time. Also, want to just reiterate that total locally voted school tax collections under this levy request will actually be below levels that they were in 2021 through 2024. And we've done that through that balancing piece that I shared with you earlier. Longview school tax rates are below Cowlitz and Clark County averages, which again I think is I guess indicative of our interest in being sure that we're meeting needs of our taxpayers as well. On the educational side, it represents 15% of our total budget, which is a significant chunk of what it is we need to be able to provide those services for our kids. Again, that's $16.5 million to $18 million over that 4-year period of time. It funds about 69 teachers and other certified staff members, well over 65 school support employees. We've looked at that. You look at that number, that total would be, well over 140 people that are funded through that. That's the equivalent of the staffing in 3 of our elementary schools combined that is funded through the levy, that if the levy were to fail, that we would have to figure out how to make do with 3 elementary schools worth of staffing less than we're working with right now, which would make it incredibly difficult. The levy funds about 10% of our special ed services. So again, we get state and federal special ed funding, but it doesn't meet the need that we have in terms of the kids that we're trying to serve. Extracurricular athletics activities are almost completely funded by this levy. And also it helps pay for textbooks, workbooks, other teaching materials and supplies. And there's a portion of this that also helps fund school transportation services for us to be able to get our kids to and from school. It's about $350,000 of our transportation costs come from the levy itself. All right, so when we put this levy request together, I just kind of want to frame up a little bit how an education programs and operations levy, how it fits into the school funding model. We basically get funding from the state, a little bit of funding from the federal government, and then there's a gap between what the state funds, the federal government funds, and what is actually needed to run a school district. The locally voted levy fills that gap, and frankly the system's designed to do that, and it's a very typical system nationwide as you go from different places. And so this is, for us, this is a replacement education programs and operations levy. It will replace a levy that expires at the end of 2024. We've had a levy in place in the Longview School District for as long as anyone around can remember. The community's been very generous in supporting these throughout the years, and so that's kind of where we are with this. When we put this levy together, we had 2 primary goals with it, and the first goal was to make sure that with the levy request that we continued to have the operating expenses we need to be able to continue to provide the services we're presently providing. We weren't trying to, let's see if we could do more, see if we could do different things. It's for us to be able to maintain the work that we're presently doing moving forward. So our first goal was to make sure that we had those needed funds moving forward. Our second goal was to make sure that we remain sensitive to the needs of our local taxpayers, understanding that there's a lot of challenges that people are faced with out there, and have tried to be very sensitive to that. Frankly, I believe we have pulled that off, being able to meet both of those those goals with this, and hopefully when we're done here, you'll see that we have pulled that off. So I want to start with kind of framing up with the levy itself. For us, it's about 15% of our budget. We are about $110 million budget. It's this levy request will be in the first year $16.5 million, second year $17 million, third year $17.5 million, fourth year $18 million. So it increases by about 3% per year to help reflect some of the inflationary things that are sure to come into play and rising costs that go along with that. Without this levy, it would mean significant reductions in programs and services to our kids. We're not talking about a little bit of fluff here and there. These are essential services that we provide our kids. So when we look at it, our levy, it funds, for us, it's about 69 teachers and other certified positions. Again, significant number of people. It funds about 65 full-time equivalent support personnel. So that would be like paraprofessionals, custodians, secretaries, all those positions that are out there that help support our educational mission of serving all the kids that come through our doors. And that 65 actually represents over 80 people, because many of our support employees are not full-time equivalent. Mm-hmm. They might only work 183 days a year. They might be 6.5, 7 hours per day. So that 65 number is a full-time FTE, and that's why we talk about it funding well over 65 support employees. It's actually, again, somewhere in that 80 to 85 range of people that are affected. And then it's a significant portion of our special education services that we provide as well. It helps us keep our class sizes smaller and in a more manageable place, so that we're able to better meet the needs of our kids. It provides instructional materials, textbooks, workbooks, those kinds of things that our kids need, that our teachers need to be effective in the classroom. Different classroom supplies, it helps with that. It helps with staff training, school security, student transportation. Portions of all those needs are funded by this locally voted levy. It also is the primary funding source for all of our activities, athletics, programs. And actually our athletic program is almost 100% funded by the levy. There's a very small portion of our athletics that are funded through student-raised funds, through the associated student body accounts that we have, but it's a very small portion of that. The extracurricular portion of our music and arts programs, performing arts, all those things that are happening after school are funded by the levy, as well as portions of our before and after school programs and our clubs that we provide our kids also. So really, when you get on that side of things, it's all those things that we do that help our kids stay connected to their schools, help our kids, be a part of something, frankly, that's bigger than themselves and part of a team, part of an organization, part of a production that would be out there. So that's what it funds for us as a school district. And as you can see through that, there is virtually no part of our school organization that is not in some way touched by the educational programs and operations levy, because again, it's funding those pieces that are needed, that are beyond what the state and the federal government provide for us. We do have, if you go to the second page of this on the inside, I'm going to start talking about the tax portion of this now. Kind of give you a frame first of, all right, this is what it does for us from an educational standpoint. But from a tax standpoint, we have two levies that are out there. Our educational programs and operations levy, the present one expires the end of 24. This request is for 2025 through 2028 to continue to have those funds we need. We also have a capital projects and technology levy that was passed by the community 2 years ago, April of 22, and that helps us with our facilities needs, and it's focused only on facilities and technology hardware. It doesn't fund any people, anything like that. Our capital projects and tech levy, most recently, probably the most visible example of what that was used for was the upgrades to Memorial Stadium that were recently completed. But it also helps with roof replacement. It helps with flooring replacements. It's just, all those things that we need to be able to extend the life of our existing facilities. We have aging facilities. They require a lot of care, and we work real hard as a system to make sure that we're extending the life of those facilities. So what we've tried to do is to balance those two levies to make sure that over the next 4 years that our total locally voted education tax collections remain below present levels. And that's a very key thing, that in this levy request, if approved, locally voted school tax collections will remain below levels that they were at in 21, 22, 23, and 24. And we worked hard at that. So how we've done that is by balancing our capital projects and tech levy request with our education programs and operations levy request. If you go over to the page on the right, you'll see the balance up there, and it gives just a 2-year snapshot of where we were at in 2023, and with this request where we would be in 2025. In 2023, our education programs and operations levy raised $15.2 million. Our capital projects and tech levy raised $6.3 million, total of about $21.5 million. You fast forward 2 years later with the successful passage of this levy, our EP&O levy will raise $16.5 million, as I described earlier, but our capital projects and tech levy will drop by $1.3 million to only $5 million. So in 2025, we're still going to raise about $21.5 million. And that $21.5 million remains constant over the 4 years of that levy. So we have we have balanced the capital projects and tech levy request with our education programs and operations levy to assure that locally voted school tax collections remain below present levels. If you go to the chart that's right underneath that, you get a look back clear to 2021. And what you can see in 2021 and 22, we still had a bond on the books. That was a middle school bond. It built Mount Solo Middle School. It did some improvements to Cascade Middle School and Monticello Middle School. But that bond was paid off in 2022. And so the school district right now, we have no capital debt as a district at all. We're totally out of debt. That bond is paid off. And so what we did in 2023 is we took basically those savings from that bond being paid off and increased our capital projects and tech levy a little bit to be able to meet some of the needs that we had as a system that we were that remained as a result of our failure of our two bond requests in 2017 and 2019. I know some of you probably remember that.
I was there for those, yeah.
Some of the others probably were not around at that time. But there were still a lot of needs, so we felt, all right, we have an opportunity here with the bond being paid off to put a little more into the maintenance of our buildings and extending the lives of those buildings. But our board had the sense to recognize that over that request, that we've got an education programs and operations levy coming up in the future. So we better build that capital projects and tech levy so that it decreases over that 4 years, because we're going to need a little bit of a cost of living increase built into the education programs and operations levy. So as you look at that chart, you can see in 2021, our total tax collections were $21.55 million. In 2024, they're $21.51 million. But now you go to 2025 to 28 with this levy request, the actual total locally voted school tax collection amounts will get slightly under $21.5 million. Goes from 21.49, and then the last 3 years it's right around $21.48 million. So we've used those two levy requests and have balanced them to assure that we're not putting an additional burden on our taxpayers through the locally voted school tax collections. Okay? So that's kind of that whole tax collection side of that, where we've tried to, just to remain very sensitive to the needs of our taxpayers. We've also looked at tax rates. Now, tax rates are a little harder because we can't control tax rates. That's all based upon values and everything else and formulas and all that happens at the county level, which is why we focused on tax collections. We can control tax collections, and the amounts that are included in this levy request are constant. If the property values rise, we don't get any more money. We get $21.48 million. If property values drop, we still continue to collect $21.48 million. Tax rates will fluctuate with that assessed value changing. But when we look at in the estimates that we've done in work that we've done with our tax experts through the Educational Service District, we do anticipate tax rates dropping from about $1.98 per thousand to $1.83 over the 5 years of this levy request. And then we've also done a comparison of, what are our tax rates in the Longview Public Schools compared to other area school districts? And what we found is our tax rate is lower than the Cowlitz County average, and it's significantly lower than the Clark County district average. So not only are our tax collections going to remain below those tax rates, we anticipate dropping. And and again, if you were to plop a given property in Longview and plop that into the average school district in Cowlitz County or the average school district in Clark County, you would find that you pay lower taxes on that same property because of those tax rates being lower over those. So that all makes sense. So that's kind of that whole tax piece that kind of goes along with that. And there again, as we've tried to be sure that we're being balanced between our educational needs of our kids, but also the needs of our taxpayers. It's actually a very good question. I think that's in the eye of the beholder. What may not feel necessary to one person is incredibly necessary to somebody else. And you start getting at the extracurricular areas or kind of where people hit on that. And I would argue that that's an incredibly important piece of what we do and in terms of what we provide for our kids and them finding a connection to their school and again, being able to be a part of something, whether it's a team or a club or a play or a band that teaches so many things that are outside of, whether or not you can, divide or subtract or, whatever. It's those experiences that help connect them to school and teach them the value of hard work, perseverance, working together as a team. So for I guess for me, it's an essential part of what it is that we do, and frankly, it's an expected part of what we do. There may be some in the community that don't value that, but historically, I think the vast majority of communities value those programs and what it is that we do. And frankly, we get a lot of input about we should be doing more to be able to help that connection and allow kids to feel, again, being a part of that and learning those things that aren't necessarily learned from a book or learned from direct academic instruction.
One of the things we talk a little bit about how it just gets the kids to school.
Yeah, well, and that's part of that connectedness part of it, that for many of our kids, that, all right, I know I'm a part of this team, I'm a part of this club. That is, I don't want to say it's a carrot, but it certainly becomes something that is purposeful for them and really gives them a sense of purpose. I think we all as people, we want to belong to things. We want to be a part of things that are bigger than ourselves, and in those kind of programs help them to find that. And there's a lot of identity that comes with that.
Yeah.
You often, I'm a theater kid, or I'm an athlete, or I'm a music kid, and that identity is so important for kids to have things that's mine, and I'm pretty good at that, and I'm working my tail off on getting better at that. I think there's just unmeasurable value that comes from providing those opportunities for our kids.
There's another point on how the state funds. They fund on something called a prototypical model. And that says if you have a school this size, you get staff at this size. And it's down to the hundredth, like 0.37, for example, of a such and such. Well, if we were all in one big monster building, we could probably work that way, but we're spread out over 7 elementaries, 3 middle, and 2 regular high schools and alternative high schools. So there's a lot of sifting and sorting to try to match that up. And it's an item that's on the short agenda item for the legislature. They're somewhat looking at it, but probably not going to be making any movement on it. And the other part is, you heard Dr. Zorn talk about 10% of our special ed funding. This is throughout the whole state. Every community is only supposed to have a certain percent of special ed. Longview has a significant amount over that. So we get funded for what the average special ed staffing is. So this is money that we have to use to pick that up. So the other comment, I grew up in this school district. I started as a teacher and was administrator. And I'll tell you, school's a lot different now than it was when I was working. I retired 20 years ago. I got to say I graduated in the top 10 of my class out of high school because I was in Montana and there were only 10. and it was family connected. Everybody knew everybody. So, I never saw a discipline issue during my whole school time type of thing. So, but communities are different. Like Dr. Zorn talked about, every child gets free lunch and breakfast now. That didn't happen way back when I was there. The whole social emotional thing coming out of COVID was a deep hit for every public school in the country, and we're climbing out of that. And from a board standpoint, one of the reasons I chose to be on the Levy committee was to lose that many staff members when we're climbing ourselves out of the hole. It just put us back in the hole. And you tend to find, I think, people in communities who have the means to move to different places will move if you don't have programs for them. You don't have, you've got oversized classes, this type of thing. So it's a long-term kind of a problem that if we were to fail like Woodlands failed twice, it's going to take them multiple years to work out of the hole once they do get that back. So